Welcome to the Explainer. All right, if you're gearing up for a coding exam, you know Z-codes can be a real headache. So in this Explainer, we are building the ultimate study guide to help you crush it. We're going to focus on the key rules, the tricky terms, and the exact scenarios you'll absolutely need to know for your test.
Okay, let's dive right in. Here's our game plan. We'll start with the fundamentals, just to make sure we have a solid base. Then, we'll jump into the really critical sequencing rules for exams and screenings. After that, we'll get into ongoing care, tackle a few special scenarios, and wrap it all up with the final showdown: Z-codes versus external cause codes. We're going to build this up layer by layer so you're ready for anything.
All right, first things first, the basics. The easiest way to think about Z-codes is that they're the backstory. They don't describe what's wrong with the patient right now. Instead, they tell the story of why they're even here. Getting this concept locked in is honestly half the battle.
So here's the bottom line. Z-codes answer the question, why are you here today, when the answer isn't, I'm sick. It might be for a routine screening, some aftercare from a surgery, or maybe to flag a personal history that could impact their care. It's all about providing that crucial context.
Now this is basically your cheat sheet for looking things up in the index. Seriously, if you get stuck on a test question, searching for these exact keywords will almost always point you in the right direction. For your exam, you've got to know these terms: admission, examination, history, observation, aftercare, problem, and status.
Okay, let's get into what might be the most frequently tested and most confusing area: sequencing for exams and screenings. This is all about the rules of who goes first. In other words, which code gets to be the principal diagnosis.
And here it is, a classic test question. You've got a patient with no symptoms, a routine screening, and then bam, an unexpected finding. The way you sequence this isn't what you might intuitively think, which is exactly why it's such a popular question on exams. Let's break down the rule that settles it.
And this table just lays it all out perfectly. This is the core difference you have to burn into your memory. For screening exams, the Z-code is always king. I don't care what you find. The reason for the visit was the screening, so that code goes first, period. For other routine exams, the rules are a bit more flexible, but for screenings, the Z-code always leads.
All right, next up, let's untangle two terms that sound super similar but are completely different in the coding world: follow-up versus observation. One is for checking up on a patient after they've been treated, and the other is for when you're trying to figure out if they have a condition in the first place.
So here's the breakdown. A follow-up exam using codes like Z08 or Z09 is basically planned surveillance. Think of it as, hey, we treated this thing, now we're just making sure it hasn't come back. Observation codes, on the other hand, are all about diagnostic uncertainty. It's when a patient is being watched closely to rule out a suspected problem, like a concussion after a car accident.
Now, pay close attention, because this is a huge rule you need for your exam. What happens if that routine follow-up actually finds something new? Well, in that case, the new finding completely takes over. The new diagnosis becomes the principal diagnosis, and get this, you don't even use the follow-up Z-code at all. The entire focus of the encounter just shifted from just checking to, we found something.
Let's shift gears and talk about the codes that give us a snapshot of a patient's long-term health. These are the status codes. They cover everything from aftercare to long-term drug use, and they add really important details to the patient's story.
These status codes are so important because they act like little red flags that can affect treatment decisions. For example, knowing a patient is on long-term blood thinners, that's a Z79 code, is absolutely vital information for a surgeon, right? These codes aren't the main reason for the visit, but they provide essential context.
And that brings us to a really foundational rule. The official guideline is crystal clear. You generally can't use a status or history code as the main reason for a visit. Think of it as supporting information, not the star of the show.
But you know how it is in the world of coding, right? For every big, important rule, there always seems to be one very specific and very testable exception. And trust me, exam writers love this one. Remember this code. Write it down: Z91.81. History of falling. This is it. This is the only history or status code that the guidelines explicitly say can be used as a principal diagnosis. If a patient is there specifically because of their history of falling, say for a fall risk assessment, this code can and should go first. Okay, now let's look at a couple of special categories that have their own unique rules you're going to want to have memorized. We're talking about social determinants of health and genetic counseling. Both are becoming more and more important in healthcare.
So for social determinants of health codes, we're talking about things like homelessness or problems at work. The key thing to know for your test is who can document it. And the answer is, well, almost everyone involved in the patient's care. This is super flexible. The info can come from doctors, social workers, nurses, and even from the patient themselves, as long as a clinician puts it in the record. That's a key detail.
And here's another one of those very specific sequencing rules you just have to memorize. If a patient who knows they have a genetic susceptibility comes in for counseling about it, what's the reason for the encounter? It's the counseling. So the Z code for the counseling, Z31.5, has to be sequenced first. The code for the genetic issue itself comes second. It's the why behind the counseling.
Okay, time for the final showdown. This is one of the most fundamental rules in all of coding, and you absolutely cannot get these two things mixed up on your test. We're talking Z codes versus external cause codes.
So let's boil it all down. Here is the absolute must-know takeaway. Z codes explain the why of the visit. Why is the patient here? And they can be the principal diagnosis. External cause codes explain the how, what, where, and when of an injury, and they can never, ever be the principal diagnosis. They're always extra information. A Z code can be the whole story. An external cause code is just one chapter. So as you review all this, think about that. Where are you most likely to trip up under pressure? Is it mixing up the screening rule with the follow-up rule? Or maybe forgetting that one single exception for the history of falling code? Pinpointing your own potential pitfalls is the last step to really, truly mastering Z codes. You've got this.